Well, the last question arc of Umineko has wrapped up, and woo boy is this one a doozy. Episode 4 is easily the most complex one yet. You know, because the previous episodes were so straightforward and easy to understand. Between the events of Rokonjima and the story of Angie looking for answers on what happened to her family that fateful day in 1986, a lot of information is thrown at the reader, and it was a bit overwhelming to say the least. The narrative is further complicated by the story being told out of order, constantly jumping between past and present, with the Angie of 1986 fighting alongside Badler, while also searching for the truth of what happened to her family in 1998. In terms of pacing, I agree with some viewers who argue the time jumps interrupted the flow of the story and could drag on a bit. In the beginning, I did find myself a little bored with how drawn out, and at times repetitive, the Angie and Maria parts were, and wishing we could go back to 1986 to see the events of the conference. But it didn't take long before I was enraptured with Angie's story, and she quickly became one of my favorite characters in the series. Through Angie, we learn more about the world of magic and witches, Maria's tragic home life, and the aftermath of the Rokonjima massacre. We also got introduced to some great characters like Amakusa and Kasumi, and her reveal to Badler was one of the most touching moments in the entire series. So yeah, I definitely came around on Angie and hope that somehow we'll see more of her in future episodes. As for the Rokonjima story, it almost seemed like a side story in this chapter, which makes sense as we've dedicated 3 episodes to it so far. This episode went absolute ham on the fantasy elements, and while deep down I had a feeling none of it was real, it was hard not to be taken in by the spectacle and lose sight of what's really happening. There were a few bombshells dropped during the family conference, such as the confirmation of Kinzo's death, but things are kicked up several notches once we get to arguably the best tea party yet. This is essentially the final battle between Badler and Beatrice. With Badler being given the blue truth to finally have a fighting chance to win the game, they go back through all 4 game boards and revisit all the mysteries in order to force the game to end. However, just when it seems Badler is about to defeat Beatrice once and for all, she creates a stalemate that prevents either of them from achieving victory with 3 simple words: who am I? And isn't that the big overarching question Umineko asks? Who is Beatrice, and what is her goal? I've been told it is technically possible to solve the mysteries with the information given so far, but I doubt I'm smart enough to do that at this point in the story. But, of course, you know that won't stop me from trying. There were so many questions brought up in this episode that I won't talk about the Rokonjima murders much, as they've been covered in previous chapters enough, and instead I will focus on Beatrice's relationship with Badler, what magic and witches are in the world of Umineko, and what Beatrice's grand plan could be. And unlike Badler, I will not take the easy way out and say that every mystery can be solved by claiming it was done with small bombs. What is the sin Badler committed 6 years ago? Ushiramiya Badler has a sin. Because of this sin, people die. No one escapes. All die. The sin is not between Ushiramiya Badler and Beatrice. 6 years ago, no person called Beatrice existed. Considering Badler was only 12 when he committed this supposed sin, anything beyond leaving the family and abandoning his last name for 6 years is pure speculation. I doubt it was anything against one of the adults, so it narrows it down to people around his age or younger. I mentioned it a few times in my playthrough already, but I think it could have something to do with Shannon. Badler did describe her as his first love, and Shannon brought up in a previous episode how he promised he would come back on a white horse to rescue her and then just never came back for the next 6 years. Maybe she felt betrayed and hurt by him abandoning her, and waited until this family conference when he'd finally returned to enact her revenge. Hence why him not remembering the sin, aka forgetting his promise, is itself the sin. If not Shannon, maybe Canon. He's been an interesting character throughout all the episodes. His character has seemingly died and come back to life, or died under suspicious circumstances. We know he loves Shannon like a sister, so maybe he feels anger at Badler for breaking her heart. He tells Shannon multiple times that it's foolish to love someone, maybe because of what happened the last time with Badler, and he's enacting revenge for Shannon's sake. Another theory is that it has something to do with Maria. Beatrice is very interested in convincing Badler that witches and magic exists, and Beato is shown to be very closely tied to Maria. As for the part, no person named Beatrice existed 6 years ago. The person who Badler sinned against was not named Beatrice at the time. The name Beatrice was, while Badler was gone, passed on to this person, which explains how Beatrice can be personally affected by Badler's sin and still claim in red that the sin is not between Beatrice and Badler. I believe the idea of taking someone's name or title is going to be a major key to solving this mystery. Who is Beatrice, aka Who Am I? Alright, here's the big question. We know a woman named Beatrice existed and died in 1967 when Rosa was a child. So how do we explain the presence of Beatrice in 1986? Like I said before, I think title or name passing is key to figuring out this mystery. Did the name or title of Beatrice get passed down to someone else? In the lore of the Golden Witch, the name Beatrice can be passed down, such as to Ava and finally to Angie. Not only that, but we see the concept of name passing brought up again when Badler proposes that people claimed they saw Kinzo in the dining hall, but through the blue truth he states that Kinzo was already dead at that point. Badler theorizes that the name Kinzo was passed down to someone else, and everyone present at the family conference acknowledged the presence of Kinzo, which Beatrice accepts as valid. But we learn from Lambda Delta that most of the theories Beatrice accepted as valid were not actually true. Also, can I just say how demoralizing it was for all of my theories to not only be immediately shot down by Beatrice, but for Lambda to then dismiss Badler's blue truths in red. And just when it seemed like he was gaining some footing in his battle against Beato, Lambda Delta and Bernkastel reveal that she was just going easy on Badler and not even really giving it her all. Anyway, sorry, little bit of a rant, moving on. As for who Beatrice really is, like I mentioned before, the servants who are considered furniture, specifically Shannon and Canon, are the most suspect. They have the time, the means, and the knowledge of the island to concoct such an elaborate scenario. I mentioned that Maria is connected to Beatrice somehow, but it's unlikely that she has anything to do with setting up these very complex murders, since she's so young and only visits Rokkenjima once a year. Maria could have unintentionally aided in helping the culprit since she fully believes in Beato and would do anything she asked, and the mastermind used that to their advantage. As for the flash of words at the end of the episode, "Please kill me quickly. Try to stop me. If only you would never come back. I wish I had never been born. Why am I unable to love anyone?" These statements further bolster my theory that the culprit is either Shannon or Canon, someone who believes they are incapable of love since they're furniture, wishing they had never been born, wanting to be killed and wanting the game to end. Shannon and Canon both state that they want to go to the Golden Land where they can be free. Shannon seems to have found love with George and Canon with Jessica, although Canon is more hesitant to the idea that he is able to love and be loved, so with this, it might lean more to his side. But Shannon's personal relationship and history with Badler might shift it towards her being the mastermind. Or who's to say the two of them aren't working together? Chapter 4 shows that two killers either working concurrently or together isn't out of the question. After all, they seem to be the only ones who remember the events of previous games with the conversation in the basement cell. What other reason could they have knowledge other people shouldn't have, unless they were behind it? Throughout almost every chapter, we hear Shannon and Canon talk not only to Beatrice directly, but talk about her amongst themselves. Shannon seems to have more of a reverence and respect towards Beatrice, while Canon expresses anger and hatred towards her. Does the culprit fully believe that they are Beatrice, like some sort of split personality, or are they just taking on her name and pretending to be her to accomplish their overall goal? I'm still unsure of that. Another big problem with this theory is that Shannon and Canon die before Badler's meeting with Beatrice. And while Badler doesn't see Canon's body, he does find Shannon dead when he's alone on the island, and the credits confirm they both died on the 4th and 5th Twilights respectively. I have no way to explain this discrepancy, but they are the most likely suspects I have so far. So, Kinzo's confirmed to be dead since episode 1. What does this mean for the mystery? We now know the truth about Kinzo. The implications of that revelation reach all the way back to episode 1. If the scenes in which he appeared can no longer be trusted, what does that mean for those who claim to have interacted with him, i.e. the servants, Nanjo, Kraus, and Natsui? They're all in on putting up the front that Kinzo is alive, but why? For Kraus and Natsui, the obvious reason would be so Kraus can continue to have a hold on the Ushiromiya fortune. But what reason do the servants, especially Genji, as well as Nanjo, have to keep up the lie? Nanjo's motivation may also be money. Since he has a sick grandchild and was working solely as Kinzo's doctor, having left his clinic to his son, maybe Kraus paid off Nanjo to keep up the lie. On another note, Goda may have had no idea that Kinzo was actually dead, since he hasn't been working at the mansion for long, and it hasn't been confirmed when or how Kinzo died. And I don't remember if Kumasawa ever had interactions with Kinzo in any of the episodes, so she may be unaware as well. This means that Kraus, Natsui, Nanjo, Genji, Canon, and Shannon were aware of this and were actively trying to hide this from the rest of the family. I was already suspecting that Canon and Shannon were playing some sort of role in the games as accomplices or killers, and this reveal only makes them more suspicious. If Natsui, Kraus, and possibly Nanjo are motivated by prestige and money, and I believe Canon or Shannon are behind the murders, what about Genji? He's an anomaly here. I don't see him motivated by money, but for some reason I don't think he's behind the murders. Even though Kinzo's already dead, so all the scenes that we have seen with him never happened, his grand goal was to resurrect Beatrice. Even when he was alive, the other family members confirmed that he's been obsessed for years with this goal. So maybe Genji promised Kinzo he would help in any way to help with the ceremony, even after Kinzo passed away, which is why he may be aiding Shannon or Canon in some way. The question is, how did Kinzo die? Illness? Old age? Murder? We know now why his body is always burned, to hide the fact that he was probably long dead by this point, perhaps even rotting, and burning the body covers up the cause and time of death. What about the money sent to the family of the victims, and the fact the envelopes were sent out before the murders took place? We learn through Angie that envelopes were sent to the relatives of the murdered, including herself, that contained a key, card, and PIN number to a safe deposit box that contains 100 million yen. The PIN number matches the number written outside one of the murder scenes in episode 3. The interesting part is that the mail was postmarked to October 3rd, before the family conference, so the money must have been arranged before the killings began. This means that the killer planned the murders before the ceremony even started, and they also had access to Kinzo's money. So this narrows down who could be behind the events. All the siblings were financially hurting before the family conference, so it's unlikely to be any of them, and it doesn't seem like any of the servants should have access to the money either. Based on my theory so far, because Kinzo is already dead at this point, the money was passed down to someone that was not Kraus. After all, if Kraus was the rightful heir of the money, he would have had no need to hide Kinzo's death, and none of this game would even happen. If, as I theorized, the culprit is Canon, Shannon, or both, why would they have access to the fortune if they're mere servants? Was this money put aside ahead of time at Kinzo's request before he died as part of the resurrection ceremony? And he entrusted his most loyal servants, one allowed to bear the one-winged eagle, to set the plan in motion. Maybe Genji also played a role. Whoever it was most likely also the same person who was acknowledged as Kinzo by the family at the conference. Also, remember the numbers written on both the door of one of the murder scenes in episode 3 being the same as the PIN number. As we know, the first half of the code is the same as Badler's birthday, so obviously whoever set this up has an invested interest in Badler. What about the second half of the numbers, 1129? Can we come to any conclusions given the new information given in this episode? I tried, but I wasn't able to come up with any new ideas. If we assume 1129 is a date, November 29th, it would be after the family conference usually takes place, October. So any assumption about it having to do with Badler's sin is most likely not correct, since Beatrice says the sin took place on Rokenjima, and Badler would only visit there once a year for the conference. So unfortunately, I still have no clear answer for what the second half of these numbers mean. What is magic? And if magic isn't real, how can we explain the things the adults saw, with even Kyrie and Jessica telling Badler that magic is real and not to doubt its existence? One of the biggest focuses in this chapter was the world of witches and magic, with the introduction of the Mariage Sorcière, aka the Witches' Alliance. As members, you must accept each other as witches and respect each other's magic. Beatrice and Maria are the sole members, with Angie having been kicked out when she was younger for denying magic exists. I believe this alliance was one born from loneliness. Maria and whoever is taking on the title or persona of Beatrice created the mariage social to deal with their sad and isolated lives in order to create magic and happiness, and to bond themselves to each other. They created magic to be able to summon furniture that could be their friends. When Angie lost her family, she turned to Maria's grimoire and eventually learned to accept magic to escape her own loneliness at school by summoning the Seven Stakes, Maria, and Sakataro to help deal with her isolation. So, what then is magic? Magic is belief. It's a story you tell yourself to process and come to terms with reality. If you believe in magic hard enough, it becomes truth. In relation to the story, magic is meant to change our perspectives of what's actually happening. For example, we the reader see Maria's tragic childhood with a negligent and abusive mother, and yet she writes in her diary that she has fun every day because she spends them with her friends, aka Sakataro and her other stuffed animals. Because she believes it, it becomes her reality. As for Angie summoning the Stake sisters to kill her aunt's bodyguards, my guess is that it was Amakusa shooting them with a sniper rifle from off-screen. Maybe she and Amakusa were wearing wires so they could communicate with each other, so that he could keep tabs on her, hence why when she called out areas for the bodyguards to be hit, Amakusa was able to shoot exactly where she specified, which made it seem like magic invisible entities were tearing them apart. Furniture such as Sakataro, the goats, and the Seven Stake sisters are only illusions created by their summoner, which is why they can't perform actions in the real world. The sisters can't kill Angie's classmates because they don't actually exist. Maria is the only one who can talk to Sakataro because she provides his voice. Beatrice is unable to revive Sakataro because she is not a real witch. The big revelation about witches we learn in this episode is that they're born of human emotions. Black witches push their negative emotions onto others, while white witches take on negative emotions and transform them into positive ones. White magic is love, belief, and forgiveness. Black magic is trauma, grief, and hate. The big takeaway from this episode, and a reoccurring theme, was the phrase, "Without love, it cannot be seen," in regards to magic and witches. Seeing someone's hurt and empathizing with them is magic, such as Angie seeing the trauma both Kasumi and Ava have experienced, and learning not to hate, but to understand their pain. Not only that, but Angie accepts that by denying magic when she was a child, she deeply hurt Maria and wishes to make amends. I have a feeling this phrase relates to Badler's relationship with Beatrice too. Without love, without understanding, he cannot see her and why she is doing what she's doing. If he comes at her with hate in his heart and fails to see his sin and the pain it caused her, he will never find the truth, and the killings will never end. As for why everyone's story remains the same in regards to what they saw, the only thing I can theorize is that they were told what to say by the mastermind. Maybe either all the kidnapped adults were bribed with money or were threatened to give the kids the same story so the children wouldn't be killed. And if they had witnessed a bunch of people be murdered in front of them in the dining hall, of course they'd be more likely to cooperate. Jessica may have also been ordered to tell Badler over the phone to believe in magic if the culprit threatened that they would kill Maria and Badler if she didn't. Or maybe they threatened her life and then killed her anyway. It is established by Vergalia in the third game that scenes not seen by Badler have the potential to be unreliable. Any scene not witnessed directly by Badler is a subjective speculation of what might have happened and can't be taken at face value. So, all the events claimed to be seen by the survivors in the dining hall and afterwards, while shown to us as magical and fantastical, could be just the visual interpretation of the story that they were ordered to tell the cousins. What is the significance of Badler's mother not being a Sumu, and who is his actual mother? This was a pretty out-of-left-field revelation, but what, if any significance, does it bring to the overarching mysteries? Let's break down what we know about Badler. We know his name is Ushiramiya Badler. He is not Ushiramiya Asumu's son, and he is Kinzo's grandson. So we have to question the identity of who his parents are, as we can't claim he actually is Rudolph's son yet. We know that Asumu is not his biological mother, or at least that he was not born from her according to the Red. The way this red truth is worded is a little awkward, so there may be strange wordplay going on here. Could Kyrie be his actual mother? They say she had a miscarriage before Angie was born, and on the same day Asumu gave birth. I have no idea if that has any connection to Badler or not, but it seems like too much of a coincidence for that not to be important information. And what reason did Beatrice have to bring this up? Just to throw Badler off kilter? I doubt it. I feel like there's a reason she would reveal this knowledge. And how does Beatrice even know the truth? I assume Badler not being Asumu's son isn't common knowledge, possibly a secret shame in the family that isn't spoken about. I was playing with the idea of Badler being Beatrice's secret son that she had with Kinzo, who was then given to Rudolph to raise as his own son. But the red truth confirms that Badler is Kinzo's grandson, not son, so that theory is out the window. This is a question I don't have a solid or confident answer for, but felt like bringing it up nonetheless. Wait, Angie died in 1998? The credit scroll reveals that Angie actually died in 1998. One theory could be that Angie died by jumping off the roof of the building at the end of Chapter 4, which is where her 1998 self died. But if that's the case, then everything that happened after the end of Chapter 3 never actually happened. Another theory is that Angie was never actually saved by the stakes of purgatory on Rokkenjima. She was actually killed by Kasumi's men, and all the events of her using magic, seeing Ava, and seeing Maria and Beatrice in the Golden Land was all in her mind as she lay dying. Angie's existence in 1998 and 1986 is something that I still can't wrap my head around. I feel like a lot of the fantastical things that we see can be explained as an elaborate and magical interpretation of actual events. But Angie's presence in this purgatory or meta world has me scratching my head. I'm guessing it's different layers or worlds within the story. We have the real world, and then the game board, which is a metaphor of Angie using the knowledge that she's discovered throughout her investigation, and going back in time, as it were, to figure out how the events on Rokkenjima played out. Then there is the meta world, or tea room, with Beatrice, Badler, and all the other characters. And then maybe another separate higher plane with Bernkastel and Lambda Delta, who are the only ones who are able to jump to different fragments. We can argue the one true game board was Chapter 3, the one where Ava survived. So what about the other game boards? Could they be based on something written in the message bottles Beatrice sent out to be found after the events of Rokkenjima? They were all confirmed to be written by Beatrice, the same person who both wrote in Maria's grimoire and sent the envelopes to the families of the dead. Whoever Beatrice is may have written down different scenarios that may or may not have happened. The infamous cat box paradox. And each chapter is Angie going into these different meta worlds to try and piece together what happened. I have to admit that of all the mysteries of Umineko, the idea of the different worlds and timelines is definitely the one that trips me up the most. What is Beatrice's ultimate goal? I find it hard to believe that, if my theory is correct, Shannon or Canon would go to all this trouble to set up this very elaborate scheme and murder all of these people just because they either feel betrayed by Badler for something that happened when they were children, or, in Canon's case, getting revenge on behalf of Shannon. I think there's more to it than this. It's shown that Beatrice wants to be stopped. By the end of this episode, she's practically pleading with Badler to kill her and end the game. It's almost like whoever Beatrice is, they feel they literally cannot be stopped until either someone solves the epitaph, Badler remembers his sin, or they are killed. And yes, Lambda Delta and Bernkastel state that it was just Beatrice acting to let down Badler's guard, aka using the North Wind and Sun method. But I don't believe it. Beatrice wants the mystery to be solved. Like I mentioned before, I believe on Kinzo's deathbed, his money was given to his servants to enact his game, to solve the epitaph, with the winner receiving the gold. Even if he's dead, he wants the ceremony to continue. Shannon or Canon either took the name of Beatrice in earnest, believing themselves to be her, or took the name merely as an alias. They are, above all else, loyal to Kinzo, believing themselves to be his furniture, so they dutifully sent out the letters announcing the game is on. But they have a different goal in mind, which is to get Badler to remember his sin. This is why he is always left alive until the end in each game, and if he doesn't remember his sin, the game ends and everyone dies. But if someone solves the epitaph, by Kinzo's rules, the game must end with no one else being killed. But why then, when Ava solved the epitaph, did the murders continue? Simple. Because Ava continued to kill after, breaking the rules. I believe Beatrice punished her by continuing to murder her family, making sure to go after George in particular. And was her writing the code for the deposit box on the door of the room George was killed in meant to mock her, or was it an expression of condolence? Either way, I think Beatrice figures that there are a few outcomes to her game board. Badler remembers his sin, everyone is spared. Someone solves the epitaph, everyone is spared. Badler does not remember his sin, and no one solves the epitaph, everyone dies including her where they go to the Golden Land. Or she is killed and she can go to the Golden Land. I think Beatrice fully believes the Golden Land exists, and justifies her murders by saying everyone will be reunited in the Golden Land and will be happy. She herself, assuming it's Shannon or Canon, can also go to the Golden Land and finally rest, and thus there is no bad outcome for anyone. And with that, we wrap up the final theory video before diving into the Chiru episodes, where I will surely get all the answers I'm looking for, right? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this discussion video. Thank you for your patience, as this one took longer than expected to put together, and look forward to episode 5 starting next week. Until next time, bye. Special thanks to my top tier patrons: Nana, Sparky, Jared Fan, Joel Ostman, Harry Gazif, Pirate, Pancake G, Asborn Kennedy, and iCognito.